Hey everybody, welcome back to Author Etiquette. Today, I have a very, I'm not going to say old friend, but a friend I've known for probably 25 years. I think I met him at a conference in Tucson many moons ago, Swank, the sequel guys. Yes, the sequel guys. And we've kept in contact. One of the pioneers in systems management and some other things going on with Microsoft. So, Rod, it's great to have you on, and take it away.
Take it away. What am I supposed to say after all of that? The intro was so perfect. Yeah, so we have known each other. Oh my goodness, when you think about it, probably over 25 years, probably,
Yep.
right. So when you say old friend, I guess that probably does sort of kind of fit, even though it hurts to hear
That's
that.
the years. That's the years, not the age. That's
Yeah,
the
I
years.
get it. But just looking at myself on camera and with the gray hair, it really does kind of play to that. So I'm
Yeah.
okay. I'm okay with it.
All right.
I'm okay with it. I feel
Awesome.
pretty good. So,
Awesome.
but yeah, I am Rod Trent. I am a senior program manager at Microsoft. As you mentioned, my life started in the realm of technology with systems management. Now at Microsoft, I work on all things AI and security. Try to have a discussion with anyone that works at Microsoft and they don't immediately say they work with AI, because that's literally all we do these days.
Excellent. Excellent. But you're not only a technology person and very, very good. He used to have a website called My IT Forum
Yep.
that was the place to go for systems management. And it definitely was a great, great website and a plethora of information. I edited or authored a few snippets on there before, but I recently found out that you write books other than technology books.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've written a lot of technology books in my lifetime. I actually started more or less kind of as a creative person. My whole career has been generally focused around content creation, content marketing, creating content. But it did start kind of in the fiction realm. But then obviously life took over and you had to pay the bills. So I took that creativity piece, whether it was product documentation or skilling or things like that, and what podcast, how media has kind of evolved and progressed. I've kind of kept up with that as we've gone along. So we just consider content as content. But yeah, I started this kind of creative, more fictional side of the content creation process. That's literally how I started life. I remember in high school, myself and my two best friends, still my two best friends to this day, we sat in like study hall and wrote out these stories. We put ourselves in this post-apocalyptic world. We called it Lust, last
Yeah,
unharmed surviving terrorist. And of course, terrorist is a bad word these days, so you can't really
yeah.
say that. But at the time, it was okay. And so we created this whole world where we drove around in this old beat up van called the Lustmobile and tried to save. But I've kind of always had, that kind of creative flair. One of the things that's of interest, and I indicated that I moved into kind of that professional career for content creation, ultimately to pay the bills. But I noticed more recently, over the past couple of years, working for Microsoft, where we generate content, we create these things that are supposed to be impactful for customers. And over a period of time, I started being super reluctant to do those things, or
Mm.
my creativity, even in those things, were not where I thought that they should be. Right. So I was just
Mm.
kind of, it's just an output mechanism at that point, input, output.
Mm.
Took the tact to kind of review and reassess and realize exactly what it was that I was doing. And I was missing out on that creativity aspect. So I wrote technical books for years. I took a really, really, really long hiatus, because if you've ever written a technical book, you
Yep.
realize that it's a lot of effort for very little return. So I thought it just wasn't worth my effort. until recently, I was invited to a topic that I thought absolutely needed to have kind of the official Microsoft Press stamp on it. So I wrote a book on that, but that kind of got my juices flowing again. But in respect to, I wanted to go back to that fictional aspect, because what I have found by going back and releasing kind of this bigger creativity within myself, it's actually made the creativity of my professional work even better and enables me to enjoy it even more. So I was just kind of siloed into this area where I was just kind of forcing myself to do this stuff without kind of releasing that creativity or that creative aspect, which it has been super therapeutic.
So nobody is saying that the stuff Microsoft produces is fiction, folks. I've worked at Microsoft myself, so
Yeah. Well,
not fiction.
what may seem like fiction today will come to fruition within 5 years.
Yes,
Let's just put it that way. It's visionary. That's a better way to
yeah,
put it, I think.
yeah. I remember I used to tech edit all the MCSE books for Q Publishing, and I would get them in either in the Word format, or they may be in the first edition. And I'd go through there, and they got a call one day from the editor. He said, "Hey, we're fixing to do a book on Windows 2000 security, and do you want to write a chapter?" I go, "Why, sure, no problem." I said, "What is it on?" She said, "Kerberos." In the back of my head, I was like, "What the hell is that?" I didn't
Right.
even know
Yeah.
what it was. I didn't know what it was. So I read the RFC, reached out to the guy that wrote the RFC, did a lot of research, and the chapter came out pretty well. But again, technical writing is different than fiction. The
It
audience typically.
I wouldn't say it takes a lot more research, but it's a different type of research. Just
Yes.
like you said, when they talked about Kerberos, you're like, I don't know what this is, but then you have to spend the time to,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
become kind of that SME or that expert level to be able to
Yeah.
accomplish that. So
Yeah. Exactly. So you have books. You got some books published that are fiction, I
I
assume.
do.
You're right.
I do. I have one called, well, it's an actual beginning of a series called Sword of the Shattered Kingdoms. And it's kind of like a whole, kind of an epic. I have the second book that will be released. I think it's October 18th. So what
Mm-hmm.
I've done is I've created this story, and then there's some primary characters in this story, and now I'm going back and doing kind of the backstory on each of those characters, because there's one single person that is kind of this primary individual, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the other books identify how they have come to know this person in previous lives, whatever, however that happened, because obviously the main character is the hero, but
Mm-hmm.
then they all come together to combat an evil. So it's fantasy. It's along the lines, I've always been a fan of Robert E. Howard and his works, like Conan and stuff like that. So
Oh, I love that movie, the original. Fantastic.
yeah, yeah. So I've always been a fan of that. But I've also been a sci-fi, just general and hard science. Michael Crichton was one of, or is still, because they're still kind of releasing his works even after he's passed. But Michael Crichton, I just love the adventure, but how he encapsulates it in real science within the
Yeah.
books, because you not only do you get a good story, but you actually learn something, right? So there's some
Yes.
highbrow big brain stuff within his stories. So I have the fantasy side, but then there's also a science fiction side. So I do have some books coming out within the next 6 months to a year. They're more kind of on the science fiction side as well. Science fiction / horror, I guess, if you put it that way.
Do you self-publish, or do you have a publisher?
So the first couple books I self-published. I'll probably continue to self-publish, but there's been enough interest in this first fantasy book series that, yeah, I will. I do have a publisher for some upcoming ones for that.
Okay. Yeah, I like to. I self-publish one of four, and I'm going to self-publish a couple of my first two novels back. I have the rights back. I'm going to self-publish those. I enjoy it because I get a little more leadway. I can go in and edit. Uh, it didn't have didn't have an editor, review and everything, but you can be a little more free. And I love doing the research. When I wrote my World War One book, I just love doing the research and finding things that you didn't know, or even hear of before. There's these nuances that when you start doing the research, even when you're doing research for fiction, there's a lot of truth in fiction because you have to make the book believable enough that you go,
Yeah.
that's quite possible.
Well, and
Yeah.
then that speaks to you talk about having an editor. So there were some technical books that I did that I would put out on GitHub and use that GitHub kind of that DevOps process to write books. And I use the crowd it's crowdsourced editing because they're like, well, this sucks, or I don't know where
Yeah.
this is going. But in relation to the fiction books, my wife is an avid reader and she loves good stories. So I give her those books to read and she'll tell me flat out, oh, that makes no sense. I don't know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
You need to
Mine
add
will
this
too.
here. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, it's crazy.
And I appreciate that because
Yeah.
in my head, it works for me. But as a writer, you're not supposed to be actually writing for yourself, even though you are therapeutically. You're supposed to write a story that everyone can get into. And
Oh yeah.
unless somebody else reads that ahead of time, you may just totally miss a huge audience.
Yeah, that's true. I know when I first started writing, I was like, oh, I'm not going to send this out to anybody. I'll wait till it's published. By the way, that's stupid. So the last book one of four, I sent it to folks in PDF, right? Word, go for it, and got some great feedback. And then, send out ARC copies. I think that is so important to let other folks read it, even if it's a whole new genre for me. I wrote fiction, thriller, spent down writing historical fiction. So the whole genre thing, you got to let somebody else, read it, look at it, critique it, and you can't. You got to, have a little thin. You can't be thin-skinned, right? You got to have a little bit of armor on you to be able to take that and roll with it.
Well, and that's another piece of that too, because quite honestly, the difference between writing technical books and fiction books is you are putting a lot of yourself out there.
Oh yeah.
And so when you put yourself out there, you want to, it's like anyone else, you want to be accepted, right? And it's a kind of a scary thing. It's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
difficult in some respects, but by enabling other people to help you with that editing process, it makes it a little bit easier because you're still, right, throwing dice, hoping
Oh
somebody
yeah.
likes what you like. But at the
Exactly.
same time, you want, again, to tell a really good story that it resonates with people.
Exactly. I mean, I just started writing. Well, other than the technical stuff, which was 20 years ago. Just the last couple of years, 2.5 years or so, almost 3 years, just started writing. Something popped into my head. I ran it by a good friend of mine I've known in the Army for ages. He said, "It's a good premise. Run with it." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I wrote two of them, and then I was in the middle of the third. I had this idea for one of four, and I stopped completely on a dime and started writing one of four, and could not get it out of my head
Huh,
fast
yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
It's the way that the kind of creativity, I guess, goes when you have something you just got to get out. So when you write, do you write a certain number of words a day, or do you say I want to get this thought done, or is it a chapter? What's your methodology or your
It's
process?
usually a thought. So what's really helped me with the writing process is really kind of refining the mechanism of how I write. I'll develop the book synopsis, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
know exactly where I want to go with this. It can change over time. You always have to adapt. But
Yeah.
then I'll develop an outline of each chapter. And then before I write each chapter, this has been the thing that's helped me the most, is I'll create beats for every chapter. So, 15, 20 different beats. And then I just fill the beats in. This is how I want the chapter to go. These are the things that absolutely must happen. Now I'll just kind
Mm-hmm.
of fill those in. I find myself a lot of times, I'll write every day, but I'll find myself sometimes looking at those beats and start writing like, well, I can finish this. I got to put
Right.
this in here because if I don't write this now, I'm going to forget this later. Just going back to that, how we're old friends. I'll have to just kind of put that in there now. So sometimes my writing goes beyond what my goal was for that day. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of important to be open and adaptable to do that, right?
Yeah. So I'm more of like a pantser, I guess. I write kind of free, but what I did do on the last book is everything I wanted in the book, I had it listed. You know, machine gun, a tear, mustard gas. I had everything listed. And as I was going over the history of the first expeditionary forces in first century in World War One, the dates I had to make sure that was in there because I wanted to touch every one of these things, but not be repetitious over hitting them again when you talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that really helped. And making sure that because when you do historical fiction, if you say in 1917 that they had the Browning automatic rifle, guess what? like May or July 1918.
Oh,
Somebody will find that and go
yeah.
say that's not right. You know,
Yeah.
there's I'm a amateur historian. I think I look at myself like that,
Well, I
but I
think
enjoy
it's super
reading it.
important, though. I think it's
Yeah,
super important
yeah,
because everybody trying to rewrite and revise history these days, it's so important to tell these stories.
yeah. No, I agree 100%. So again, we've known each other for a long, long time, and I always liked the way that you were able to. You're a marketer by trade. I mean, I think I can say you're a marketer, but you have the
Yeah.
ability to market technology in a way that is well, it makes sense, and people want to read it and they like it, right? So, what book when you write technical? What book did you like the best, and what did you like least like when you wrote technical?
I have to be honest. I'm really looking forward to how these next two technical books work out.
Mhm.
Just because, again, I mentioned earlier, because it needs to have kind of this official stamp on it. But my first technical book is absolutely my favorite, just because that's what really kickstarted my career. If you remember, you probably remember this book, and you can still find it on Amazon today. I don't know if you can
Yeah,
actually buy it, but SMS Installer. It was a silly, stupid thing as part of
yeah.
that systems management stuff. I had at the time McGraw Hill reach out to me out of the blue. I remember the guy's name, Michael Sprague. I don't know what he's doing these days, but he reached
Oh, I
out. He
remember
said,
him. I remember Michael.
"Yeah." He reached out
Yeah.
and he said, "Hey, I want you to write an SMS book. Can you do it?" And I said, "I don't want to write an SMS book. There's too many SMS books out there already. I want to write it on this." And I submitted my outline, and they trusted me. And I thought, "Oh, this is awesome." So I wrote this SMS installer book, and that thing just like flew off the shelves. People absolutely wanted that thing, and again, it was surprising, but that was the thing, that moment, beyond the swank.com stuff that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the thing. And it was Swank that actually had Michael reach out. He saw the content that I produced there,
Hmm.
and then he reached out about that. But it was that book that literally launched my career. Otherwise, I'd just be, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. Who knows? Who knows?
I never thought I'd be doing this. So I'll put
Right?
it I'll
Yeah.
put it to you like that.
Who
People,
who
I'm
would
the
have
least
ever
person
thought?
you would have thought of it. I'm the least person that would think that you tell Travis wrote a book. They're like, oh, come on. I mean, I knew him in the '70s. He didn't,
In
he
the
didn't write a
70s.
book.
Well, you're trying to make us older and older all the
I
time.
tell you, shoot, I'm probably better health now than I was. So what you got? You got your series. What's the name of the series? Is there a name to the series?
The series is Sword of the Shattered Kingdoms. Yeah.
Okay,
And
you can
it's
get them
it's
on
an entire
Amazon.
series. The next book that's coming out is focused on the Ice Princess as part of that book, Isolde Frostbane, and literally how her journey from her growing up as a little kid all the way through to her becoming this person that could
Hmm.
lead groups and stuff like that. And then as part of it, I had to. It's interesting too. I'm really one of those kind of people that I'm not offended, but if I watch a TV show or a movie and I hear, cuss words and stuff like this, sometimes I feel like it's used in the wrong place or it's just used for effect. And I think
Yes.
sometimes it's less creative. You just throw something in there to say, I'm somebody's mad. Why don't you say why they're mad or what that anger actually looks like and then what they do with it? So all of my books, there's no language. It's all kind of clean. And in
Hmm.
fact, in this one that'll be out here in a few days, there's even a romance between Isolde and Eldrick. So I'm trying to write something literally that anybody could read, still get something out of it. Even the science fiction slash horror stuff, I totally appreciate the Alfred Hitchcock way of describing things. You leave to the reader, you leave to their
Yeah.
creativity to kind of create that scene. You write just enough and you're descriptive enough so that you're not overbearing as far as graphics and goriness and stuff like this. But so I found, at least with my first couple books that I wrote, people will read it and they'll talk about it and they actually have a different experience because they're creating this whole scene in their mind the way that they think that it is almost. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my intent. And this next book that comes out, it's a female hero, right? So it's a dominant female, and I'm trying to introduce more, I have two daughters. I'm trying to introduce more females to this genre because I think it's kind of important.
Yeah. I have two daughters and a son, and both the fiction books have they're strong female characters that's why I wanted to portray them because I think that's the real world.
It is.
You know,
Yeah.
when you think about it, it's just easier to write it. And I try not to put a lot of cuss words in the book. But, hey, I want younger kids to be able to read them, and I don't need to throw out an F bomb or nothing in a book, or because that takes away from somebody that is probably very smart in the book. That makes them come like they don't have the vocabulary may be limited.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, like I said, I'm not offended by that stuff. I mean, I sat
Yeah.
through Wolverine Deadpool, and there's an F bomb in every sentence, but
Well, watch the Bear on Netflix.
the bear, okay.
That's like if they took out every F word, I think it would be half as long.
Half as long. That's hilarious.
About a
Yeah,
kitchen.
I think what was it, The Wolf of Wall Street at the time they were trying to suggest they had more F bombs
Oh
in it
yeah,
than any other movie ever, but I think that just like raised the bar. Now we got to do this.
yeah. So you do outline, you write a synopsis, and do you set? What I do is I say I'm going to release a book, let's say in February or whatever, and I backward plan when I
Yes.
want to be done with that book, and I work towards that. And I try to do maybe 1,000 words a day, or some days I won't write, but I'll have an idea and I'll jot it down. But I try to work to that date, arbitrary
I do
date.
the same thing. One, two, three, four. I have 5 books that I'll release within the next 6 months to a year. And I do the same thing, and I do it on purpose to
Mm-hmm.
set very specific goals to myself that I absolutely must obtain.
Right.
Because you can get lazy and you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to write. But if there's a deadline, and I've heard the arguments that when you set deadlines, you're less creative. I don't think that's the case. I think that
So
creativity
it's a
comes out no matter
motivational
what.
factor.
Yeah.
It's a motivational factor for me because I want to get done, and I want to see, and I want people to see the results of what I just wrote or whatever. But yeah, I do set some deadlines. I try to stick with them, you know, pretty religiously. I've
Yeah.
got I got the podcast going on. I'm going to DC the week after next. I'm doing a Veterans Day special because I was at a book signing, young kid, early 20s, whatever. And I was talking about the book, and I talked, well, it's about the soldier, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and he said, "What's that?" I was like, "Okay." Then I said, "It's in Arlington National Cemetery." He goes, "Where's that?" So I've made it my quest to educate folks on not Veterans Day, but why do we have it,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm going to my son lives in Northern Virginia, so it works out perfect. So I'm going to DC. I'm going to go to the World War One Memorial, which is just 106 years. They finally have a World War One monument, and I was there for the unveiling.
Yeah.
And then I'm going there to World War Two, Korea, Vietnam, and then also I put in to interview the Sentinels at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So I'm going to have a sit down with those guys and
Wow.
talk about that, the tomb. So I'm going to do all that. I hope they have. I'm going to have that out by the 11th because I'm going to be in Tampa on TV on the 11th uh, to talk about that and that book,
That's
of course.
awesome. You're gonna have to send me
Yeah,
all the links and
yeah.
stuff for all that stuff.
I'm excited. I've got the whole, my head
Well, and you know what
scripted
I would
out.
love? You've probably thought about this, and you're probably already going to do it. But I'm just thinking, if you could capture some really good pictures of that time and the unknown, so all the stuff,
Yeah,
and put it in your books. I mean,
yeah,
that's super sad that that individual didn't know what those things were.
yeah. I mean, I was taken back. To be
Yeah,
perfectly honest with you. But
yeah,
so that's my little quest.
I love
So I'm
that.
going to have it. So I'm going to do that, and but I because I just I think history is so important, and if you don't live it, read it, you're going to relive it. And some of the history is
Absolutely.
not good. It's horrific.
I,
They
I
want to be able to do
completely
that.
agree, and I think these times are 100% evidence that that actually happens.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So I just, really got to get that out. So what else? What else you doing in your spare time? I know you got some grandkids and
Yep, have two
everything.
grandkids. That is my spare time. Is literally just family. I run a lot. Again, trying to fight this age thing, but I do that. I get into it. My grandkids, Reed and Meredith. So Meredith is about 6 months old. Reed's a
Uh,
little over 3 years old, and both of those are awesome ages. The 6 month old, she's already starting to want to walk and all that good kind of stuff. And anytime I walk in the room, her face lights up. That just, man, it
yeah. Oh yeah,
gets you,
it's a
right?
big deal.
Yeah, it
I've
is.
got I've got eight. I got eight grandkids, and I'm finna to have a great grandkid. And I'm
Goodness.
like,
Wow.
I'm way too young for this.
So, yeah. I mean, I thought that being a grandpa was the most wonderful thing in the world. I can't imagine doing the great.
Uh, we're moving. We're
Okay.
actually moving close. We're moving closer to them.
Isn't that funny? We're considering doing the same thing. We've been kind of on this trek for the last year or so to
Yeah,
find how we could move closer to the grandkids. Yeah.
yeah. We're actually. I'm semi-retired. I do. I'm monitoring a special needs bus for the school district, so I help the little
Cool.
kiddos get back and forth to school and stuff. And
Yeah.
which, man, those kids are they are so perceptive. You have to be careful. They There's not an intelligence issue. It's just communication issue a lot of times, right? But
Oh,
they know everything that's going on. So you got. But yeah, so we're moving back up to Arkansas. Bought some land here recently. My wife retires within the next year, so yeah, we're moving back up there and do that stuff up
yeah,
there.
that's
Whatever.
great. That's great.
Yeah,
That's yeah. And it's great that you're able to do that as well.
yeah, I can write from anywhere. I can podcast from anywhere
That's true.
because I've done about 100 interviews of authors over the last 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
And everyone, what I found is the writing community is so nurturing from one another, right? If I reached out to somebody and said, "Hey, Rod, what do you think about this?" Okay, boom, I get something back,
Yeah.
constructive. Or when I wanted to first self-publish my book, I didn't know how to do it, so reached out to a guy named Eric Bishop, talked me all the way through it. I said, "Man, this is just super simple." So that's what I've gained from almost from a military perspective, right?
Mm.
It's the same type. Everybody's willing to help each other for a common goal of getting your thing done, whatever your thing is, book or whatever. And I don't just do thrillers or suspense, or I do all genres. And I do if you've sold one book or a million, because that one person that sold that one book may have something that strikes somebody says, you know what, I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Well, and again, that's kind of affirming there, right? So just to hear everybody talk about their own experiences, the things they do, that gives other people the chance or
Yeah.
empowers them to want to do it themselves. Because unless I know a lot of people in my life, family members, friends, unless you give them that push, they're not going to do that thing. So they have to have something that pushes them toward that thing.
Well, I drove my son to the Army recruiting station.
Just kick them out the door. Yeah.
He was going to go in and put an application in a German restaurant. He speaks German, wife's German. So he speaks German. And we're closed. I go, hey, man, there's the Army recruiter right there. Let's go talk to him. I walked in there. First thing I said, don't, retired Army. Don't blow any smoke up anybody's butt. Let's
Yeah.
just talk.
Yeah.
And 3 months later, he was in the Army. And he got out 4 years and fantastic career right now. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, a little motivation for anybody.
Never. No.
Because I thought we were going to have to sell the house with him in the bedroom. Like furniture. Sorry, you got to take him.
Right.
Heater.
Well, and then when you buy the house, you always have to have at least one extra person. You have to think, oh, well,
Yeah,
we need an extra bedroom. So, yeah.
exactly. So, what marketing advice would you give, or how do you market your book?
I'm super fortunate at, you talked about marketing, and I've always kind of been a marketer.
Yeah,
I'm really good at selling things. And that's really what marketing
yeah,
is building the fear of missing out if you don't do that thing. But I'm fortunate in that I've been in this geeky career from a technical perspective for, 30 years or more. And I built up an audience. And the interesting thing is that the same things that I like as far as fiction goes, the horror, the science fiction, the hard science, the fantasy stuff,
Yeah.
that's the same group that I've run with for the past 30 years. So I've been very quick to jump on whatever that latest thing is for amplifying or promoting, like, Twitter,
Yeah.
now X, LinkedIn. I even use LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Instagram, TikTok. I have some stuff on the TikTok. TikTok is amazing. You probably know this already, for promoting your books. I think even more so than some of those other ones that I mentioned. But like I said, I've been very
Yeah.
quick because of that marketing perspective and some of the things I do at Microsoft for content marketing. You have to know where your audience is, and you have to know how every audience at each one of those locations is absolutely different, and different messages resonate. You have to know what message to actually, you can't take a message that you put on TikTok and put it on LinkedIn, because people
Right.
ignore it. People either ignore it,
Right.
or it's LinkedIn. Some people will be offended. So you have
Yeah.
to tailor your messages. So that's, I guess that's probably where, I would even make some recommendations, is just know your audience, know who you're talking to, know how to talk to them. That's just, I think, probably the best prescriptive advice. But like I said, I've been so super fortunate to be in this industry for so long. Here's a good example. When I say something on social media, whether it's, X, LinkedIn or something, people take notice, or they look at it, or my audience is large enough. I have this voice and this platform where people kind of get what I'm talking about. Best example I can give you is a recent example, just how fortunate I am. Okay. A year ago, we had EverDry come out to clean up our basement, put in the waterproofing, all this stuff. They did an amazing job. I love EverDry. Sometime during this past summer, when in this area we had zero rain, there was no rain. So who knew the system that they put in that took the water away from the house and took it down to the ditch, into the grate and stuff like this, because it was so dry and there was no rain, we had no clue that one of the pipes had become misaligned. So when we had rain due to that hurricane recently, we only had like 2 inches of rain.
Right.
All of a sudden, we started getting water in the basement. Right? I'm like, oh
Oh
my
wow.
goodness, EverDry, we got water in the basement. They came out on Monday, and one person dug up around the house and determined exactly what it was, that it was something under the ground that they're going to have to repair. He called back and he said, well, I'm sorry, but we can't be here till November 18th. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to deal with water in the basement again for the next. So I did this thing, which I do sometimes, and I went on X, and I also went on Facebook, and I talked about what the issue was. It wasn't, I'm not a mean person. I just said, here's the issue. We love EverDry, blah, 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 but this is the situation, and they can't get out to us for another month. Water pump, I've got it connected to Wi-Fi, of course, so I can monitor it, and it's literally cycling over 3,000 times a day right now because of the
Oh
situation.
wow.
It's literally it's replenishing itself with water all the time, because it's literally pulling it out from underneath the house, pushing it down back underneath the house, and then just continually running.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of a serious issue. So I put that on Facebook and Twitter yesterday. Today I got a call from EverDry and said, first of all, we want to apologize. We didn't understand that the situation was as serious as it is. We'll have somebody out on Tuesday. I said, oh, thanks. That's great.
Appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Right. But that just evidence, again, being super blessed that I have this megaphone almost. So it really not only helps with my daily job at Microsoft, where I can amplify the things that we're doing, but it also helps. It's almost cheating, I
Oh
guess,
yeah.
with my fiction stuff. People are like, oh, Rod's doing this now. Oh my goodness, let's go see what this is like.
Yeah, I didn't know until I saw it, I think on Facebook. We're
Yeah,
friends on Facebook. Yeah,
yeah.
see it on Facebook.
Well, and
Huh,
that's one of the
interesting.
things, I don't know how many people know this as well. Facebook is the best place for creating like book pages where people can go follow. So
Yeah.
I've created a page for every single book that I will release. And that's where you can communicate with your audience and send people back to there, because you can post images, you can talk about, when the book's releasing, you can release a free chapter. I always release a free first chapter for all my books, so people can get a sense of what it's going to be like. But it's like one of the best ways to get an instant audience for that upcoming book.
Yeah, I think that's one of my best marketing places is Facebook. It's rather inexpensive, and I found out, people try to go in there and they try to create tweak their own ads. I'm like, you know what? They have spent millions and millions of dollars on AI. Let the back end generate where and who to go to, because
Yeah,
they know.
they do.
I mean,
They do.
they know.
They
And
do.
they
Just
just
I was talking. Wife and I were in the car talking about replacing our basement windows.
yeah.
And guess what showed up on Facebook for like 3 days?
Basement
Window
windows.
ads. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. Well, Rod, it's been fantastic talking to you, and yeah, good seeing you again.
Yeah, always. We're going to have to get together sometime
Yeah,
soon. I don't know if you still frequent the technology conferences at all, but I'm at all of them anyway, just because of my job. So,
yeah, I've been to one lately. I don't know how technical I am anymore, but I think I surprised some people with my knowledge.
well, you should just surprise people with your presence. I think people would absolutely appreciate that.
Thanks, Rod. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank
Thanks. Bye
you.
bye. Bye bye.